Hello. So in this video, I figured I would take a moment to record a quick thought about anybody who's been paying attention to the release of the Selmer Supreme and is thinking about switching, who is also currently playing a Selmer Series II. So a little bit of background before we get to the actual comparison of these two instruments. My Series II, I've been playing it for about 11 years now. Based on the serial number, it was built either in 1996 or 1997. So it's quite an old Series II. I checked with Selmer to see what kind of updates may have been done to the Series II itself between then and now. And it's kind of one of those, kind of led us on a wild goose chase, and it's kind of hard to tell. There have been a few little tweaks here and there. So what I say in this video about the Series II, going from the Series II to the Supreme, might not be everybody's experience. It's just mine, being somebody who has jumped from the Series II to the Supreme. And then the Supreme, of course, would be either built in 2020 or 2021, because they just released it. I would imagine probably 2021, if I had to guess. These serial numbers have not been released. Selmer's own chart stops in 1992. My 5 minutes of Google research was fruitless in that effort. But it's a safe assumption that this instrument that I'm playing now is less than a year old. So let's get to the comparison itself. So the first thing that you'll notice when you're switching between these two different instruments is the keywork itself. I would venture a guess that if you're coming from a Series 3, probably it's not going to be as dramatic a difference as if you're coming from the Series 2. But the keywork is dramatically different going from the Series 2 to the Supreme. So the first thing I noticed when I was playing through was the palm keys. I feel like have been really improved in terms of where they sit in the hand. So on my Series 2, when I am going through here, and I have corks installed, so it's probably even more dramatic of a difference for people who don't have any kind of key risers installed. But it's still a pretty big difference. So when I'm going through my palm keys on this instrument, I would say that the D palm key hits about right here on my hand, just below my first knuckle. Or maybe right at it. Whereas on the Supreme, when I'm going up to the palm keys, it's a little bit higher. It's almost to the finger, and it's real. I mean, realistically, we're talking about a difference of, fractions of an inch, right? So it's not a huge difference in terms of physically where it's at, but just the feeling of it, I feel like it just is more where I would want it to be. Does take a little bit of getting used to, but not that long to get acclimated to these palm keys. And I think that they're also they just feel like they're a little bit closer together. So I feel like any kind of chromatic technique up there or scale technique just lays in the hand just a little bit easier without the need for any kind of key risers. Another interesting feature that you'll see on the Supreme versus the Series II are the pinky keys in the left hand. So when you're going down from B to B flat, a lot of people like to pivot their hand like this as opposed to sliding. For the people who like to pivot on the Series II, there's a little lip on the edge of the key, and that lip really does help a lot with getting that B natural to B flat technique going. On the Supreme, that lip is still there, but it's a little bit more exaggerated. And I think it's also, just like many things on this instrument, it's also a little bit more artistic. So instead of it just being a solid line and it just goes up on the side, it's actually almost kind of like circular. Like it's the very tip of the key is the furthest point, and then it kind of like glides down. which is a nice touch. But it is a little bit more aggressive of an angle. I don't think it's quite as aggressive as the Yamaha saxophones. So Yamaha players may not care for it. But coming from the 2 to the Supreme, that B natural to B flat is a lot more comfortable to execute. Okay, so another thing that Selmer changed with the Supreme is the shape of the chromatic F sharp key. And I believe this is also different coming from the 3 to the Supreme as well. So on my Series 2, you have pretty much what you would expect for a side F sharp key. You've got the oval right here, which of course you use to go from F to F sharp. On the Supreme, they kind of did a little throwback. They went back to the round pearl, like you would expect to see on like maybe an older saxophone like the Mark VI. This is one of the very few things about this instrument that I'm not super crazy about, but it's certainly manageable. I liked the oval key. I felt like it allowed for more options in terms of hand position, and and with the pearl, with it being a smaller key, you have to be a lot more accurate, and but that's such a small thing. It's not a deal breaker for me. I don't think it should be a deal breaker for anybody really, because if you're investing in an instrument like this, you should be practicing anyway, right? So and the good news is if you do play an older instrument and you already have the pearl, then there's one less thing you have to adapt to. So that's actually probably a good thing. So I don't think it's that big a deal. It is something that I've had to do a little bit of practicing to get acclimated to, but that is something that is different coming from the Series 2. Okay, now let's talk about the aspect of the new Keywork that I'm most excited about, and that's the side keys for the right hand. So on pretty much every other saxophone that I know of, the side keys are pretty much in a straight line, right? 1, 2, 3. Now, a long time ago, I had key risers installed on the side keys of my Series 2. I have fairly large hands, and so that just really helped a lot with some of my technique, having those permanent risers on there. But even the risers I put in, I wanted to be sure that it was still the same basic ratio of kind of where the keys lie. And that's kind of pretty standard, I think. If there are other saxophones that are not built like that, I'd be curious to know. So if anybody's watching this and you have a saxophone that by default has a different kind of shape to the keys, I'd be curious to hear about that. What I really have come to like on the Supreme, which at first I did not, is the shape of these keys. And let me show them to you. So you can see on this, it's an angle going down, right? So your top side key coming down right here. And if you look really closely, you'll see that there's even like a bevel shape to the side C key, which I've loved from day one. But that side B flat key is really low, like really low, like so low. I had to really go back and shed keys like F sharp major and B major and the harmonic minors and all those kinds. Any kind of key pattern that had this side key, I had to really go back and do a lot of work on just to get used to it. So it's still a little bit of an adjustment, but I've come to really, really like how low it is, and that kind of surprised me because that was one of the concerns I had, to be honest, before I bought the saxophone. I was I'm gonna have to go back and rework all that stuff. It's gonna take months, and I thought it was gonna be a huge issue, and it was an issue, just not a huge one. So I've been kind of like hammering away at those scales for the last 2.5-3 weeks, and that kind of like the way it swoops off and it gets further away from the instrument the higher up you go, I feel like that really helps. A lot of saxophone rep jumps in and out of the palm keys. We do it on gigs and things like that, and it just makes it a little bit just that much easier to jump in and out of the palm keys. And some altissimo technique where you go and you have to use both keys. You go from side B flat to both side B flat and side C. So smooth. It almost kind of directs your hand where to go, which is a really nice feeling. I love that side C key, and I'm beginning to love where the side A sharp is as well. One other thing I wanted to mention about the key work on this instrument is the Bisque key feels slightly different. And at first I thought it was just in my head when I was practicing through scales, because I kept kind of not missing the Bisque key, but it kept feeling just slightly different. It felt like I was missing it, even though maybe I wasn't. And I couldn't figure out what it was. So I took out a ruler and I measured the diameter of my Bisque keys. So the Bisque key on the Series II is it's about 1 centimeter. And on the Supreme, it's actually going to be a little bit wider. So I measured the Bisque key on my Supreme, and it was 1.1 centimeters. Now, a tenth of a centimeter, is that going to make a huge difference in technique? I don't think so. But to a player, it's going to be something that you notice. And whether or not you like it, that's a different story. But I did notice that difference, and I was like, that's kind of interesting. One other aspect of the key work here that I'm really, really excited about is the octave key itself. So coming from the Series II, you can see the key is kind of what you would expect from Selmer, swoops off to the right, lays really well in the thumb, if a bit high. Really like where that key is located. Pretty much the same on the Supreme. I know it's kind of harder to see because there's no black plastic for the dot, but it does swoop off kind of the same way, but the height of where that key comes by default, it's a lot closer to the body of the instrument, and the key itself doesn't travel nearly as far. So it's a lot more, I don't want to say gentle, but it's a lot more precise maybe, but it's smooth. And really, I think it encourages good saxophone technique, because if you're going to try to do what a lot of students do, where they come over and they try to do this, you can't do it nearly as well. It almost really encourages you to keep your thumb where the tip of your thumb is on that key, which I think is really, really helpful, because then those palm keys, are in a really good spot. You can't, on this saxophone, you can't really push the hand over too far. Just because of where everything's located. I think it encourages really good hand position. So I really like that about this instrument. It's very ergonomic. All the key work on this instrument has been really, really thoughtfully designed. I feel like people coming from a Series 3 might not notice as big a difference. But if you've been playing on a Series 2 for the last 10 years and you play this, it's going to be very, very different. Mostly in a good way. There's some things about probably the side keys that might require a little bit of investment in terms of practice to kind of acclimate to, but on the whole, it just feels so much better, I think. All right, so one thing that I was a little skeptical of, to be honest, when I heard the marketing for the Selmer Supreme, was the claims of the instrument's intonation. They said the most in-tune saxophone ever made. Okay, Yamaha did that with the custom EX2. They said, we're going to adjust some things about the intonation, and especially the low notes, and blah blah blah, right? And anytime companies make these kinds of claims, of course they're selling a product, right? One hopes that the R&D is there to back it up, and that it's truly as good as they claim it to be. So to test that, I figured I would just play through the full range chromatic scale slowly, and once on the Series II, and then once on the Supreme, so that we could really hear the difference between these two instruments, both in terms of tone and also intonation. I should probably mention my setup. So I'm using the new concept that came with the Supreme. So I guess they're packaging a Selmer concept mouthpiece in every Supreme, which is cool. for me because I really like the concept. I know not everybody likes it, but I do. So I got a fresh mouthpiece, which is nice. So Selmer concept mouthpiece with a Van Doren pink gold inverted ligature and the Van Doren V12's reed size 3. That's my setup. I'm not going to change reeds or mouthpieces or ligature or anything about this between the two instruments. So to recap there, I think it's safe to say that Selmer's claims of the intonation of the Supreme are not exaggerated. There's still saxophone tuning issues that I think are kind of inherent to the nature of the instrument. You know, middle D is still sharp, C sharp still maybe just a little bit flat. The thing I really like about the Supreme is that it minimizes that, and I think has a more even tone quality than my Series 2 does, or at least it feels that way anyway. When I recorded, I did my best to not do kind of the habitual adjustments that I'm used to making to try to give you a true kind of read of what the actual natural tendency of each of those notes is. And so, I mean, as you saw from that, you know, it's not, you know, dead center the entire time, but man, it's a lot closer than the Series 2, that's for sure. Okay, so that's, I think, a pretty thorough summary of kind of the more technical, dry details of the difference between the Series 2 and the Supreme. But, of course, we want to hear it in action. So let's hear a couple different excerpts. Each one of these, you will hear it first on the Series 2, and then secondly, you will hear it on the Supreme. So yeah, just to recap here, in terms of what I'm hearing when I'm playing the Supreme, the sound to me seems a little bit more warm, a little bit more mellow compared to my Series II. The bottom and top end of the saxophone seems to have a little bit more resistance. I like that. It helps me. It makes it easier to control low B flat, to really kind of project on the high F and F sharp. And I think it just lends itself to more of a consistent tone quality. Now, obviously, classical saxophone playing or orchestral saxophone playing is in my wheelhouse. So I'm not really going to speak to anything jazz related because that's kind of not my lane to drive into. If you're interested in kind of more of hearing a jazz comparison, there's a great YouTube video with Charles McNeil playtesting a Supreme Series II and a Reference 54 back to back. So it's a really interesting video, and it's Charles McNeil, so of course it sounds great. Yeah, but again, in terms of classical playing, I think this is a huge leap forward from my Series II, again, which is 1996. So I think it was probably going to be a huge jump forward no matter what. But yeah, just in terms of the color, the consistency of the instrument, the kind of the different colors you can get out of the sound, it's just a totally different sound to me. And you combine that with the improved intonation, I'm just so pleased. It's a really big improvement. I will say that just for fun, I put the Series II neck onto the Supreme, and after a little bit of adjustment to make sure that there wasn't a leak on the octave key, I played a little bit, and man, whew, it really opened up the sound a lot. So if you play the Supreme, whether it's jazz or classical, if you play this instrument and you're really attracted to the key work, and you really want that kind of feeling in your hands, but you don't like how maybe mellow the sound is, I encourage you to experiment with necks as well. I don't have a Series III neck to put on the Supreme, otherwise I would try it just to see what it was like. I suspect that the intonation tendencies would be quite different, so that would be another factor to consider. But yeah, so find the right mouthpiece, find the right neck. If you want this Supreme, if you want that key work, if you like the way that feels, but you can't find the right mouthpiece to pair with it, consider changing the neck too. Yeah, so in case you can't tell what my verdict is, here I just really like it. And I've been playing it pretty hard for about 3 weeks now, and it just gets better and better and better. So anyway, thank you for watching this video. Really appreciate it. If there's any information about the Supreme or switching from a Series II to the Supreme that you want me to address that I missed in the video, feel free to leave that in the comments. I'm happy to, sit down and find some time to make a quick YouTube video. I know this instrument still is kind of new to the market, so it's hard to get a hold of it. But in the meantime, if there's anything I can help you with, to any questions I can answer, I'm happy to do that.